Secrecy, being an instrument of conspiracy, ought never to be the system of a regular government. Jeremy Bentham, A Fragment on Government, 1776.
On March 24, 1968, Aer Lingus Flight 712 vanished from radar and crashed into the Irish Sea near Tuskar Rock, killing all 61 people on board. Official investigations pointed to mechanical failure, but a darker theory has persisted for decades, that the plane was accidentally struck by a British missile during military exercises. Missing files, eyewitness accounts of strange objects in the sky, and classified military activity have fueled suspicions. Was this a tragic accident, or a cover-up of a military mistake? This documentary investigates the evidence, the theories, and the unanswered questions surrounding one of Ireland's most haunting aviation disasters.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Oscar Wilde, The Importance of Being Earnest, 1895.
In the 1960s, the Irish Sea was a hub of activity. Commercial aviation was expanding, and Aer Lingus, Ireland's national airline, was a symbol of progress. But the skies were not just for civilian use. The British military frequently conducted missile tests and exercises in the area, particularly from the Aberporth range in Wales. This overlap of civilian and military activity created a dangerous environment, one that would come under scrutiny after the Tuskar Rock air disaster. On March 24, 1968, Aer Lingus Flight 712 departed Cork Airport at 10:32 a.m., bound for London Heathrow. At 11:13 a.m., the plane disappeared from radar and crashed into the Irish Sea. All 61 people on board were killed. The official investigation pointed to mechanical failure, but the lack of conclusive evidence left room for speculation.
The sea is a cruel mistress, hiding secrets beneath her waves. Sebastian Junger, The Perfect Storm, 1997.
Among the theories that emerged, one stood out: the possibility that the plane had been struck by a British missile. This idea was fueled by reports of military activity in the area, eyewitness accounts of strange objects in the sky, and the secrecy surrounding British operations. Could this have been a tragic accident, covered up to avoid international scandal? The Tuskar Rock air disaster is not just a story of loss. It's a story of unanswered questions, of power and secrecy, and of the search for truth. This documentary explores the evidence, the theories, and the lingering doubts that continue to haunt this tragedy.
In seeking truth, you have to get both sides of story. Walter Cronkite, A Reporter's Life, 1996.
Every accident, no matter how minor, is a lesson. Anonymous, Aviation Safety Manual, 2001.
On the morning of March 24, 1968, Aer Lingus Flight 712 departed Cork Airport with 57 passengers and 4 crew members. The Vickers Viscount aircraft was a trusted model, known for its reliability. The flight was routine until 11:13 a.m., when the plane suddenly disappeared from radar. Witnesses reported seeing the aircraft plunge into the Irish Sea near Tuskar Rock. The crash site was remote, and recovery efforts were hampered by rough seas. Only a small portion of the wreckage was ever recovered, including parts of the tailplane and fuselage. These fragments showed signs of metal fatigue, but the evidence was inconclusive. Investigators could not determine the exact cause of the crash.
The truth is out there, but it's buried deep. Chris Carter, The X-Files, 1993.
The lack of definitive answers left room for speculation. Among the theories that emerged, one suggested that the plane had been struck by an external object, possibly a missile. This idea gained traction due to reports of British military activity in the area and the secrecy surrounding the investigation. The final moments of Flight 712 remain a mystery. Was it a mechanical failure, or was there an external factor that investigators overlooked, or chose not to reveal?
The sea holds its secrets tightly, but they are not forgotten. Rachel Carson, The Sea Around Us, 1951.
Eyewitness testimony is the cornerstone of truth or deception. Elizabeth Loftus, Witness for the Defense, 1991.
In the hours following the crash, several eyewitnesses came forward with unusual accounts. Fishermen and residents along the Irish coast reported seeing strange objects in the sky near the time of the disaster. Some described a flash or streak of light that seemed out of place. These reports raised questions about whether the crash was caused by something other than mechanical failure. The most compelling accounts came from those familiar with the area. One fisherman claimed to have seen a missile-like object moments before the crash. While these accounts were dismissed by investigators as unreliable, they added fuel to the theory of British military involvement.
Eyewitnesses are the first draft of history, but not always the final word. Simon Schama, A History of Britain, 2000.
The British government denied any missile activity in the area at the time of the crash. However, records show that the Aberporth missile testing range in Wales was active during this period. Could a missile have strayed off course and struck the plane? The lack of transparency from British authorities only deepened suspicions. Eyewitness accounts are often unreliable, but they cannot be ignored. What did these witnesses see, and why were their reports dismissed so quickly?
The eyes see what they see, but the mind fills in the gaps. Oliver Sacks, The Mind's Eye, 2010.
Secrecy is the enemy of accountability. Edward Snowden, Permanent Record, 2019.
One of the most controversial aspects of the Tuskar Rock air disaster is the missing documentation. During the investigation, Ireland's Department of Transport requested files from the British government related to military activity in the Irish Sea. Some of these files were classified, while others were reportedly lost.
The absence of these documents raised suspicions.
What information did they contain, and why were they unavailable? Critics argue that the missing files could have shed light on whether a missile test was conducted in the area at the time of the crash.
The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Carl Sagan, The Demon-Haunted World, 1995.
In 2002, a report by Ireland's Air Accident Investigation Unit, AAIU, revisited the case. While it concluded that mechanical failure was the most likely cause, it also noted the lack of cooperation from British authorities. This lack of transparency has fueled conspiracy theories, with some suggesting a deliberate cover-up. The missing files remain a key piece of the puzzle. Without them, the full story of what happened to Flight 712 may never be known.
History is written by those who control the records. George Orwell, 1984, 1949. The military does not reveal its secrets lightly. John Keegan, The Face of Battle, 1976.
The Irish Sea, where Aer Lingus Flight 712 crashed, was not just a busy corridor for commercial aviation. It was also a testing ground for British military operations. The Aberporth missile testing range in Wales, located just across the sea from Ireland, was one of the most active missile testing sites in Europe during the 1960s. Records show that missile tests were conducted regularly, often involving live-fire exercises. On March 24, 1968, the day of the crash, British authorities initially denied any military activity in the area. However, subsequent investigations revealed that missile tests had been conducted in the days leading up to the disaster. This revelation raised questions about whether a missile could have gone off course and struck the plane.
The fog of war often obscures the truth, even in peacetime. Max Hastings, All Hell Let Loose, 2011.
The British government's refusal to release detailed records of military activity on the day of the crash only deepened suspicions. Critics argue that this lack of transparency suggests there was something to hide. If a missile test had gone wrong, it would have been a diplomatic disaster, potentially straining relations between Britain and Ireland. The presence of military activity in the area is undeniable. But was it connected to the crash of Flight 712? The lack of clear answers has left this question hanging for decades.
Secrecy breeds suspicion, and suspicion demands answers. Daniel Ellsberg, Secrets, A Memoir of Vietnam and the Pentagon Papers, 2002.
The truth is often hidden in the shadows of bureaucracy. Eric Schlosser, Command and Control, 2013.
One of the most troubling aspects of the Tuskar Rock air disaster is the missing documentation. During the investigation, Ireland's Department of Transport requested information from the British government about military activity in the Irish Sea. Some files were classified, while others were reportedly lost. This lack of cooperation raised suspicions that the British government was hiding something. The missing files became a focal point of conspiracy theories. What information did they contain? And why were they unavailable? Some believe the files could have revealed details about missile tests conducted on or near the day of the crash. Others suggest they might have contained evidence of a cover-up, with officials seeking to avoid blame for a tragic accident. In 2002, Ireland's Air Accident Investigation Unit, AAIU, revisited the case. While the report concluded that mechanical failure was the most likely cause, it also noted the lack of cooperation from British authorities. This lack of transparency has fueled speculation that the British government was hiding the truth about what happened to Flight 712. The missing files remain a key piece of the puzzle. Without them, the full story of what happened to Flight 712 may never be known.
Every investigation is a search for the truth, no matter how elusive. Malcolm Gladwell, Blink, 2005.
The official investigation into the Tuskar Rock air disaster was led by Ireland's Department of Transport. Initial findings pointed to mechanical failure as the most likely cause. The Vickers Viscount aircraft was known to have issues with metal fatigue, and fragments of the wreckage showed signs of structural failure. However, the evidence was incomplete, and the exact cause of the crash could not be determined. The investigation faced significant challenges. The crash site was remote, and much of the wreckage was never recovered. This lack of physical evidence made it difficult to draw definitive conclusions. Despite these challenges, the investigation ruled out several alternative theories, including sabotage and pilot error. However, it did not address the possibility of external factors, such as a missile strike. Critics argue that this omission was a significant oversight, given the reports of military activity in the area. The official conclusion left many questions unanswered. Was it a case of mechanical failure, or was there more to the story? The lack of transparency from British authorities only added to the mystery.
Power is in tearing human minds to pieces and putting them together again in new shapes of your own choosing. George Orwell, 1984 and 1949.
From the outset, the British government's response to the Tuskar Rock air disaster raised eyebrows. Requests for information about military activity in the Irish Sea were met with silence or vague denials. Officials claimed there were no missile tests on the day of the crash, but subsequent investigations revealed inconsistencies in these statements. The lack of transparency fueled suspicions of a cover-up. If a missile test had gone wrong, it would have been a diplomatic disaster, especially given the already delicate relationship between Britain and Ireland. Critics argue that the British government's refusal to release key documents suggests they were hiding something.
The price of power is responsibility for its secrets. Henry Kissinger, White House years, 1979.
The secrecy surrounding the British military's activities in the Irish Sea has only deepened the mystery. Was this a case of bureaucratic inefficiency, or was there a deliberate effort to withhold the truth?
The truth is not for all men, but only for those who seek it. Ayn Rand, The Fountainhead, 1943.
The Tuskar Rock air disaster occurred during a period of political tension between Britain and Ireland. While the two nations were not at war, their relationship was far from harmonious. The idea that a British missile could have caused the crash was politically explosive, with the potential to strain diplomatic ties. Irish officials were cautious in their approach, avoiding direct accusations against the British government. However, the lack of cooperation from British authorities did little to ease tensions. Some Irish politicians privately expressed frustration, believing that the British were withholding information to protect their military interests. The diplomatic implications of the disaster remain a key aspect of the story. If a missile test was involved, the decision to cover it up may have been driven as much by politics as by military secrecy. Public opinion about the Tuskar Rock air disaster has been shaped as much by speculation as by fact. For decades, conspiracy theories have circulated, fueled by the lack of definitive answers. Many believe that the British government's secrecy is evidence of a cover-up, while others argue that the missile theory is nothing more than a convenient scapegoat. Survivors' families have been vocal in their demands for transparency. For them, the lack of closure is a source of ongoing pain. The idea that the truth may have been deliberately hidden only adds to their frustration. The public's belief in the missile theory reflects a broader distrust of government institutions. Whether or not the theory is true, the perception of a cover-up has become an enduring part of the story. Fishermen working in the Irish Sea on the day of the crash reported seeing unusual activity in the sky. Some described a streak of light or a flash that seemed out of place. These accounts, while anecdotal, have been cited as evidence supporting the missile theory. One fisherman claimed to have seen a missile-like object moments before the crash. While his account was dismissed by investigators, it has remained a key piece of the puzzle for those who believe in the missile theory. The fishermen's accounts are difficult to verify, but they cannot be ignored. What did they see, and why were their reports dismissed so quickly? Residents along the Irish coast also reported seeing strange objects in the sky on the day of the crash. Some described a bright flash, while others spoke of an unusual trail of smoke. These accounts, while inconsistent, suggest that something unusual was happening in the skies over the Irish Sea. Investigators dismissed these reports as unreliable, arguing that eyewitnesses often misinterpret what they see. However, the consistency of the descriptions has led some to believe that these witnesses saw evidence of a missile test gone wrong. The residents' accounts add another layer of mystery to the story. Were they witnessing the final moments of Flight 712, or something else entirely? Eyewitness accounts are often considered unreliable, and the Tuskar Rock air disaster is no exception. While many witnesses reported seeing strange objects in the sky, their descriptions varied widely. Some spoke of a missile-like object, while others described a bright flash or streak of light. Psychologists argue that memory is easily influenced by external factors, such as media coverage or personal biases. In the case of Flight 712, the lack of physical evidence has made it difficult to corroborate these accounts. Despite their limitations, eyewitness accounts remain an important part of the story. They provide a glimpse into what may have happened, even if they cannot offer definitive answers. The official investigation into the Tuskar Rock air disaster focused heavily on the wreckage that was recovered. Fragments of the tailplane and fuselage were retrieved from the Irish Sea, and investigators noted signs of metal fatigue. This led to the theory that a structural failure in the aircraft caused the crash. The Vickers Viscount, while a reliable aircraft, was not without its flaws. Previous incidents involving the model had highlighted vulnerabilities in its tail assembly. However, the limited amount of wreckage recovered made it impossible to confirm this theory definitively. The wreckage provided some answers but left many questions unanswered. Was the crash caused by a mechanical failure, or was there another factor at play? The Vickers Viscount was a workhorse of the aviation industry, but it was not without its flaws. Reports from the 1960s highlighted issues with metal fatigue in the tailplane, which could lead to catastrophic failure. Aer Lingus had a strong safety record, but Flight 712's aircraft was over a decade old, raising questions about its maintenance history. Investigators examined maintenance logs and found no major red flags. However, critics argue that the investigation may have overlooked subtle signs of wear and tear. Could a small, undetected flaw have caused the disaster? The possibility of mechanical failure remains one of the most plausible explanations for the crash. But without more evidence, it is impossible to say for certain. The investigation into the Tuskar Rock air disaster faced significant challenges. The crash site was remote, and much of the wreckage was never recovered. This lack of physical evidence made it difficult to draw definitive conclusions. Investigators focused on the most likely explanation: mechanical failure. However, the absence of key pieces of the aircraft, such as the engines and cockpit, left critical gaps in the evidence. Without these components, it was impossible to rule out other possibilities, such as sabotage or an external strike. The inconclusive nature of the investigation has fueled speculation for decades. Was it simply a case of bad luck, or was there more to the story? The Tuskar Rock air disaster was front-page news in Ireland and the UK. Initial reports focused on the tragedy and the loss of life, but as the investigation progressed, the media began to explore alternative theories. The idea of a British missile strike quickly gained traction, fueled by eyewitness accounts and the lack of transparency from British authorities. Some newspapers accused the British government of a cover-up, while others dismissed the missile theory as baseless speculation. The media's role in shaping public opinion cannot be overstated. For many, the coverage of the disaster reinforced their belief in the missile theory. The media's coverage of the disaster has left a lasting impact. It brought attention to the unanswered questions but also contributed to the spread of misinformation. As the missile theory gained traction in the media, it began to influence public perception of the investigation. Families of the victims demanded answers, and politicians called for greater transparency. The pressure on investigators to address the missile theory was immense. Some critics argue that the media's focus on the missile theory distracted from other potential explanations, such as mechanical failure. Others believe that the media played a crucial role in holding the British government accountable. The media's influence on the investigation is a double-edged sword. It brought attention to the unanswered questions but may have also clouded the search for the truth. The lack of definitive answers about the Tuskar Rock air disaster created fertile ground for conspiracy theories. The idea of a British missile strike became one of the most popular explanations, fueled by the media and the secrecy surrounding the investigation. Conspiracy theories often thrive in the absence of transparency. In the case of Flight 712, the British government's refusal to release key documents only added to the suspicion. For many, the missile theory became a way to make sense of an otherwise inexplicable tragedy. While conspiracy theories can provide comfort, they can also obscure the truth. The missile theory may never be proven, but its persistence speaks to the power of unanswered questions. The families of the victims of Flight 712 have been at the forefront of the fight for answers. For decades, they have called for greater transparency and accountability, particularly from the British government. Their persistence has kept the story alive and brought attention to the unanswered questions surrounding the disaster. The families' fight for answers is a testament to their resilience. Despite the passage of time, they continue to seek closure and justice for their loved ones. In 2002, Ireland's Air Accident Investigation Unit, AAIU, reopened the case of the Tuskar Rock air disaster. The report aimed to address lingering questions and incorporate advances in aviation safety and investigative techniques. While the report reaffirmed that mechanical failure was the most likely cause, it also acknowledged the gaps in the original investigation. The AAIU noted the lack of cooperation from British authorities and the absence of key evidence, such as the engines and cockpit. It also highlighted the possibility of an external factor, though it stopped short of endorsing the missile theory. The 2002 report provided some clarity but left many questions unanswered. For the families of the victims, it was a step forward, but not the closure they had hoped for. In 2002, Ireland's Air Accident Investigation Unit, AAIU, reopened the case of the Tuskar Rock air disaster. The report aimed to address lingering questions and incorporate advances in aviation safety and investigative techniques. While the report reaffirmed that mechanical failure was the most likely cause, it also acknowledged the gaps in the original investigation. The AAIU noted the lack of cooperation from British authorities and the absence of key evidence, such as the engines and cockpit. It also highlighted the possibility of an external factor, though it stopped short of endorsing the missile theory. The 2002 report provided some clarity but left many questions unanswered. For the families of the victims, it was a step forward, but not the closure they had hoped for. The Tuskar Rock air disaster remains a mystery because of the many unanswered questions surrounding it. The lack of physical evidence, the missing files, and the conflicting eyewitness accounts have all contributed to the enduring uncertainty. For some, the mystery is a source of frustration. For others, it is a reminder of the limits of human knowledge. The persistence of the missile theory reflects a broader distrust of authority and a desire for accountability. The mystery of Flight 712 is not just about what happened on March 24, 1968. It is about the search for truth and the human need for closure. The Tuskar Rock air disaster occurred during a time when aviation safety standards were still evolving. In the decades since, international organizations like the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, have introduced stricter regulations to prevent similar tragedies. Modern investigations are more thorough, with better access to technology and international cooperation. However, the challenges faced in 1968 highlight the importance of transparency and accountability in aviation safety. The legacy of Flight 712 is a reminder of the need for constant vigilance in aviation safety. While the mystery remains, the lessons learned have helped make the skies safer for everyone. One of the key lessons of the Tuskar Rock air disaster is the importance of transparency. The lack of cooperation from British authorities hindered the investigation and fueled conspiracy theories. In modern aviation, transparency is seen as essential for building trust and ensuring accountability. International agreements now require countries to share information during investigations. However, the case of Flight 712 shows that transparency is not just a legal obligation, it is a moral one. The legacy of Flight 712 is a call to action for governments and aviation authorities to prioritize openness and honesty. The Tuskar Rock air disaster is a reminder of the importance of vigilance in aviation safety. While the exact cause of the crash may never be known, the lessons learned have helped shape modern aviation standards. Preventing future tragedies requires a commitment to transparency, accountability, and continuous improvement. It also requires a willingness to revisit the past and learn from it. The mystery of Flight 712 is a tragedy, but it is also an opportunity to ensure that such a disaster never happens again. The Tuskar Rock air disaster is a pivotal moment in Irish aviation history. It highlighted the need for better safety standards, international cooperation, and transparency in investigations. While the mystery remains, the lessons learned have had a lasting impact on the aviation industry. The legacy of Flight 712 is a reminder of the importance of learning from tragedy. It is a story of loss, but also of progress. The mystery of Flight 712 is not just about what happened on March 24, 1968. It is about the human need for answers and the challenges of uncovering the truth. The case highlights the importance of transparency, accountability, and the willingness to ask difficult questions. The search for truth is ongoing, and the legacy of Flight 712 is a testament to the resilience of those who continue to seek it. The Tuskar Rock air disaster endures as a story because it speaks to universal themes: loss, mystery, and the search for truth. It is a story that has captivated generations, not just because of the unanswered questions, but because of what it reveals about human nature. The story of Flight 712 is not just about a tragedy. It is about the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of unanswered questions.
The Tuskar Rock air disaster remains one of Ireland's greatest aviation mysteries.
Official investigations pointed to mechanical failure, but the lack of conclusive evidence left room for alternative theories. Among these, the idea of a British missile strike has persisted, fueled by missing files, eyewitness accounts, and the secrecy surrounding British military activity in the area. The case raises important questions about transparency and accountability. If a missile test did cause the crash, why was this information withheld? And if it didn't, why have British authorities been so reluctant to release their records? The lack of answers has only deepened suspicions and fueled conspiracy theories. The families of the victims deserve closure, but the truth may never be fully known. The Tuskar Rock air disaster is a reminder of the importance of transparency in investigations and the dangers of secrecy. It is also a testament to the resilience of those who continue to seek answers, even in the face of uncertainty.